Hey Vijay, how are you today?
I'm good. It's great to spend some time with you, Priya.
I'm so happy that you're doing our Voices of Inclusion. I'm so pleased to introduce you. I'm going to do a very quick introduction and then we'll get straight into the interview. If you want to introduce yourself, you certainly can, but I know that we'll get to hear your whole story throughout the interview. Okay.
That sounds perfect.
So I'm so pleased to introduce Vijay Pendakur today. And Vijay and I met through a mutual friend, Jason, at Electives. And we realized we have so much in common around the work we're doing. We have shared interests. We just kind of riff off each other every time we meet. And it turns out we have the same publisher for our books.
That's
So,
very true. Small world.
small world. So, I want to start here. By now, you know me, we've met a few times. I like to go beneath the surface of these conversations because I believe that's where the real wisdom lies. Are you willing to go there with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your reaction to that question?
For me, honestly, it makes me think that this is going to be a really energizing conversation. I think about the number of times I've been driving home from like a dinner party with my wife, and she's like, "Oh, what'd you think?" And I'll honestly be like, "I was bored because nobody went there." Um,
Mhm.
I know that makes me sound like an ungrateful dinner guest, but like for me, everything comes alive when people are show up in four dimensions, and when we can get into the joys of life and the hardships of life, and that's true at work, that's true at home, and so when you said let's go beneath the surface, I thought, well, yeah,
All
absolutely,
right, let's do
why not?
it.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we're on the same page. So, I'm a leadership coach. You are too. I believe that everyone influences the people around them, whether they like it or not.
Hmm.
Just by existing in the world, we exert influence. And so, in that way, we're all leaders. And I'm curious, what kind of leader are you?
Ooh, big question to start. So I think I would try and think of myself or describe myself as a situationally adaptive leader. And what I mean by that is I've learned to show up really differently as a leader depending on what the context requires in order to be successful in the goal of leadership. And so I've led teams for a very long time in-house as an organizational leader. And I've led through moments of like deep crisis, either organizational crisis or very specific crisis that affects my team, or I've led through times of extraordinary volatility and uncertainty, mergers and acquisitions, or fiscal crisis, and I've also led through times when we have to be extremely performance oriented. We've got to ship product, or we've got to hit goal, and all of those contexts require the leader to show up differently in order to bring the best work out of their team, in order to unlock resilience, unlock ideation, innovation in the face of those
Mm.
different contexts. And so for me, I'm the type of leader, I try to be the type of leader that the situation requires. Um, I wasn't always that way. I think in my 20s, I thought of a leadership in a very fixed frame and largely was just like, here's who I am, here's how I show up. And oftentimes really struggled and got critical feedback. I got the gift of that critical feedback, as painful as it was. And also noticed that every step I took towards being more reflexive and dynamic, the ability to be self-aware and change, actually was really rewarding. And so
Mm.
I was incentivized to lean into adaptive leadership because I actually felt very quickly success.
Mm.
And along the way, though, it's not for me. It hasn't been a true chameleon act because there's some principles that are always there for me, no matter what the context is and what the situation requires. And the first one is just about treating people with respect. So whether we have to ship the product on time or have to sustain this in the face of a crisis, there's always a way. Even if you need to be fierce as a leader, or extremely gentle as a leader, or decisive, or a consensus builder, all of
Mm.
those things can be done while actually treating the individuals and the teams with respect. And that's always been a first principle for me.
Yeah, that everything you've said rings true. I want to pull on the very first thing you said, which was that I've learned to be this type of leader, which tells me that you've and you've gotten feedback, you shared that honestly. How do you learn that? Like, what do you have specific examples in your life that told you, I need to shift and I need to be this type of leader?
Yes. Uh, I have a story that actually I'm writing into my book right now.
Okay,
um,
great, do it.
of um, working underneath a leader who had a reputation as a very tough boss. I didn't think I was going to end up working underneath this leader due to organizational change and realignment. I ended up working underneath this leader at a pretty early time in my career journey. And he asked me about my department that I was stepping into the interim directorship of. And he said, "What do you think about your department? What is the reputation of your department?" And I gave him my answer, and I could see the light dim in his eyes a little bit because clearly I had missed the mark. And one, he could have been very tough with me there and kind of lost faith in me as a very junior, aspiring, kind of up and coming leader. But he said, "Look, why don't you do this? Go talk to these 6 highly influential people across this organization between now and our next supervision meeting and ask them what they think of your department." And
Mm,
I came back 2 weeks later, like completely humbled, right? But the humbling was on 2 levels. One, it was, learning that actually my department had a pretty terrible reputation and I was unaware. But the meta was even more important. I didn't even know to ask about to gather an outside what's called outside in design, right? I was sitting there in my own context, inferring off of a very sort of biased data feed as to what success looks like. Whereas if I had been properly tooled towards how I was sense making, it wouldn't have been a surprising moment. And so for me, like an early moment in developing situational awareness was this nudge around, wow, how you interpret context has just about everything to do with what you decide to do as a leader. So what data are you getting on your context? Are you sitting in the fog of war going, well, this is what I think is happening? Well, sure, that's there. That's your intuitive and visceral sense of things. But how are you building that board of directors, even within the organization, who may be tough, who may be dissonant, who may be skeptical? That's okay to then have them say, sure, you do this one thing well, but your department does these 5 things really poorly, and and so I was 27 when that happened, Priya, and so like the awareness around leadership as a set of sense making skills. Actually, there was a ripple effect for me, right? Oh wow, okay, so how I gather sensibility and perspective is going to impact how I choose to lead. And that, was viral for me, right? And as I got more and more opportunities to grow and lead at a larger scale, I didn't let go of that practice.
okay.
That
Yeah,
makes sense.
some things stick. Yeah, it does. Some things stick, some things don't. This one seems to stick. I love that you asked this question because it feels so characteristic of you. What's the data? What's the evidence? And that's certainly something I learned from you when we first met. You were asking that question. I was like, yeah, I could stand to be more data oriented and seek the evidence and learn from it. So I realize as we've been talking that you've had all these leadership experiences that I didn't even know about. So they have culminated to this point in your career. Give me a little bit of flavor around what you're doing at this point and how all of your past leadership experiences have brought you to this point in your career.
Sure. Well, thank you for the platform to talk about myself in such a specific way. So my first chapter of my career was as a academic and a university administrative leader. So I worked at 6 universities around the country, working my way up into the upper administration, running larger and more complex portfolios, or my scope of responsibility grew over time. And along that time, I built up my academic acumen in terms of research as a social scientist. I have my Ph.D. in the social sciences and publishing and what it takes to make strong arguments and claims and like following, showing the math and finding the proof became a regular part of my practice. And then I moved into corporate leadership roles in the employee experience space. And you might think that this is a completely impossible jump from Mars to Venus, right? But actually, the through line for my 20 years in university life was the idea that the student experience is actually the product of policies, systems, and environments that can be changed in order to optimize for peak learning. You can take that exact same value proposition and reposition it as the employee experience is the end result of a set of levers, right, that you have in policy systems and environments that can be optimized in order to allow people to do the best work of their lives. And so my movement from being a student experience architect to an employee experience architect wasn't as wild as it looks on my resume, but I led in 3 different publicly held corporations before wanting to follow in the footsteps of folks like Priya, right, and build my own thing, right. I really wanted to take everything that I'd learned in these 2 very different sectors, leading at a very high level, and bring forward a set of client experiences that allowed me to add value to lots of organizations instead of being contained within one as an in-house leader. And so right now I'm in the early stages of building the business of me as a solopreneur, Vijay Pendakur Consulting, and the primary areas that I'm looking to invest my calories and passion and effort in are keynote speaking, executive coaching, and then intact team workshops, like sort of skills-based boundaried workshop experiences. And so far, I'm loving it. It's hard and humbling, and also really gratifying as the bricks start to kind of fall into place like a game of Tetris. It's starting to feel like, okay, I get what's happening here, and I'm making progress towards building a life for this chapter, this season, that will be differently fulfilling than my other chapters and seasons.
If I may, I think we need more people like you in this industry. And when I say like you, I mean lots of things. I mean someone with the groundwork of lived leadership experience in various industries, but also with your social identities coming into this work from that place. We just don't have enough representation. And I think it's really important. And, I came into this work straight out of my postdoc. I did like a few months of a professorship and then came here. So it's really nice because those of us who are here, not with the lived experience, can learn from you and we can collaborate. I can't wait to send you clients.
Well,
Um,
thank you. I appreciate that.
okay, so given all that, and now that you're making another, inflection point in your career, how do you want to be known?
Mm. Oh boy. Well, you said we're going beneath the surface here, right? And so
I don't lie.
let me embrace the radical candor here. So I have wrestled with this a lot in my adult life, and very formally in therapy, right? I've worked on this. This is my one of my central pathos is I want to be known widely as an expert thought leader, and as a really smart person, and as a really kind person. Those all sort of stack rank very similarly for me. I want to be known as genuinely kind, and as a really smart person, and as a thought leader. And why I say that with all of the kind of wrapping of like, oh, I've worked on this, because some people might be like, why would you need to work on that? Because so much of that is about the story of like where I'm seeking fulfillment and where I'm seeking adoration
Yes.
in the public sphere. And as a father of 2 young daughters, as a husband, as somebody taking care of my parents now, my private life is super important to me. Part of my pivot towards running my own business rather than being a corporate C-level executive is actually around deciding to prioritize my private life in a way that wasn't possible before. And so I have this tension between a polarity between this deep, profound desire I have to be a widely recognized, smart, kind thought leader, and then to have a balanced, humble, healthy private life. And
Mm.
I struggle immensely with this. And I wish that I could say, like, oh, Priya, I did some depth psychotherapy and I just solved it. And
Mm.
uh, I
Oh yeah,
did,
now write the book about it so everyone else
yeah,
knows about it.
right. I did the depth psychotherapy, and now I can articulate that that is the polarity that I live in and negotiate every day. But by no means have I solved it.
I so appreciate your honesty in that I interviewed another man in different industry, but shared the same thing about how important his private and personal life is, particularly around care for his family and the tension he feels around that. And I appreciate you saying it out loud because what it does, in my view, is it starts to redefine the expectations of male leaders like yourself. And that that's okay and that we can normalize that tension and make it okay to start talking about it, problematize it, and solve it.
Yes, absolutely. I was at this closed door dinner of maybe 13 or 14 HR leaders, like top HR leaders in Toronto a couple of months ago. And it was this really profound, it was one of those connection dinners, if you've heard of this like kind of viral trend of
Yeah, yeah.
organizing people, bringing them together, and then basically saying, we're not here to flex on our titles or our scope of responsibility. Like you're all great. No one cares. We're here to actually like show up in full technicolor. And one of the things I said that in one of the times I shared is that I actually want to build this chapter of my life so that my children get the best of me and not the last of me.
Mm,
It was actually me just riffing in the moment. And the number of men that came up to me, specifically men, afterwards and said, like, I'm a dad. When you said those words that my children get the best of me and not the last of me, it just landed, and I just began thinking about my life at home and what I've sacrificed to be successful professionally. And if I were to take that as a design principle, so it's a design principle for my
mhm.
business, is actually that the children get the best of me and not the last of me. Now, I'm not fully there in year one, because year one, the amount of sweat equity I'm putting into this business is
Sure.
tremendous. But I know that it's the North Star, and I didn't to double back to your point. I didn't realize the power in the transmission of a personal value um, as a middle-aged man, and the way that that would actually serve as a positive force of disruption until it happened. I just felt like I was taking a vulnerable risk to share something personal, and I didn't know at all that it would actually function as like a role modeling. You know?
This is what I mean, like, whether we like it or not, we're influencing the people around us constantly, and so being aware of that helps us to define how we want to influence the people around us. So this one sounded like a bit of a home run for you in some ways. Um, but I also believe that when we are aligned with our values, it feels congruent. It feels like a home run.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So I asked you what I think of as an aspirational developmental question, like how do you want to be known? And you're developing towards that. But I want to go on the other side of it, which is how have you been known? But more specifically, what do people get wrong about you when they first meet you?
Oh man, this is a good question. I have not. I've sat on a lot of panels. I've been interviewed for a fair amount of podcasts and things like that. And this is a banger of a question, Priya. So, because of the way that I over rotate on executive presence, I can actually send the false signal to people when they meet me in the public sphere that I have it all together and that my
Mm,
success is actually the result of having the perfect plan. And I
that
know
is
this
so
because I
good.
meet,
Yeah.
like I meet with people. I'll keynote at a conference, or I'll lead a workshop, or I'll sit on a panel. Somebody will come up to me after and say, "Will you have a mentoring call?" And generally, as long as I can manage it, I say yes, because I know where I'd be in my life if people didn't give me, the generosity of time and
Yeah.
wisdom. So I try and do the same for others. And in this mentoring call, people will be like, "I looked at your LinkedIn," and I'm like, "Oh, that's generally bad data." And they'll be like, "You just had this perfect arc," and I'm like, "Oh, let me tell you about the thrashing around in the pitch black pool, swimming pool that actually my life has and my career has been, and how many times I've just grabbed onto a floaty to breathe and then realize that it's not the floaty I need. And so then I thrash around some more and get another floaty, and they'll be like, oh, it doesn't look like that at all. I'm like, right, because the reality of most highly successful people's stories is that there's a fair amount of serendipity. There actually
Mm,
are probably a number of tailwinds or privilege that we're not
yep.
naming. And then the third piece is there's some hard work and preparation for sure. But like the idea of like some sort of genius plan is what I exude unconsciously. Um,
Yeah.
and is not. It's what people get wrong about me. And so then when we do have a one-on-one and I'm like, really real, this was a disaster. It was an unmitigated train wreck. And they're like, wow, I never thought that you would have had these hardships. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well,
Well, it's very
welcome.
humanizing, right? Like, oh, I'm not alone, right? Like it sort of gives permission to others to also be fallible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Which I think is very, very important. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So, what commitments have you made that you no longer believe in? Speaking of the threat, like I'm picturing the
Ah,
threat now because we were kind
yeah.
of the same thing, right?
So, a few things that I'm working on letting go of. One is that over rotation on executive presence. So for a
Uh-huh.
very long time, Priya, partially because of how I grew up, where I grew up, when I grew up, I had a story in my head that I have to be the most prepared, best dressed, and most articulate person in the room.
Mm. Oh, I know that well. Yep.
And now there are some real structural reasons why I felt that way, right? I think that we can sometimes gaslight people when we say, "Oh, that's all in your head." That's not true. It's not all in your head, right? Particularly when you are hyper minoritized and constantly the only in a room, like you do often represent more than yourself. And so I took this burden on of representing more than myself very heavily. Probably
Mm.
went too far with it. And
Mm.
um, what I ended up doing for myself, and this is not casting aspersions on anyone else, right? Everybody's got to play their hand the way they want to play their hand. But what I ended up doing is over rotating to the point where I actually sort of reified or reinforced a politics of respectability that is really problematic as well, right? So like, why do I need to be in a three-piece suit for you to listen to me? like, like, why do I have to look like a banker for you to listen to me?
Yes. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I
yeah.
mean? And so, uh, why can't I name the times that I haven't been successful or the things that I don't know? Right. So the answer I don't know is a powerful leadership answer, and one that for 15 years I just refused to give because part of
Mhm.
come correct, like all, like you got to be 10 minutes early and 10 minutes faster, all of the stuff that I'd grown up with um, is it's just not vulnerable or authentic to use two very sort of like oversaturated words right now. But the question is like, am I using my leadership power to expand the field of possibility for the people who come after me, or am I using my leadership power to reinforce archetypes that actually need to be disrupted and potentially dismantled? And so what I'm
Mhm.
working on letting go of right now around this very narrow definition of executive presence, which was like suited and booted, like no, I can have phenomenal executive presence in khakis and a polo shirt if I want to. You've got phenomenal executive presence. I've been in your presence and in person, whether it's a jean jacket or a power suit, right? So
Mhm.
um, owning our expertise and coming as we are, I actually think is a very powerful form of disruption.
Mm.
Working on, I can say it, but I'm working on actually believing it.
Believing it, yeah, that's the new campaign that's starting to emerge. I love this because it's emergent. Help me. I always learn from you, and I want to learn from you what you mean by executive presence. As you know, the words themselves have been problematized a
Yep.
lot lately. How do you define those words?
So how I would define those words, first, so I'm going to fall back on the academic side here, right? So anthropologically, right? I would say like as a phenomenon, executive presence is the idea that the persona that the person has is part of actually the signal that they're transmitting, in addition to the actual work product that they're bringing. So if
Okay.
you imagine you're giving a presentation at a conference, and you've concluded a year's worth of research, and you have powerful data to share on some sort of human change behavior, right? And it is a killer session, and you show up in dressed very differently than everybody at the conference. Maybe that means like hoodie and sweatpants and like old beat up low top Chuck Taylors, right? Now, in a perfect world, who cares what you're wearing? It's about
Yeah.
the slides, it's about the research. But the reality is there's a tension here, because if people are fixated on the dissonance that you're providing due to your presence, then they're actually missing out on the signal of your work. So there's a tension here. I actually am not one of those folks that's like, you could just be anything and it should, like look,
Yeah,
there's
I
also
agree with you. Yeah. And
there,
I grapple with that tension
yeah.
a lot because you started by saying it's rooted in anthropology. And I realize I cut you off because I know you have more to say and I want to get there. Um, because for me, the tension is that it is culturally informed.
Yes.
What is executive presence is defined by the norms of our culture. And
Yeah.
so difference, dissonance, what's acceptable within the boundaries of our cultural norms to me is problematic.
Yes, yes, and so therefore, like the overlay, right? So when, like bringing like a cultural overlay points out a number of problems. Bringing a monetary overlay points out a number
Yeah.
of problems, right? There are many professions that just don't even pay enough to build an executive wardrobe. If you define executive wardrobe as high-priced items, which actually
Right,
there
right.
is part of this, right? Like, so when you start to like kind of decode executive presence, it's actually loaded with a bunch of norms that are baked into it. It's very masculine, it's very white, it's very upper class, and
Yep.
so what it means as a Black woman social worker to show up with executive presence might require a tremendous code switch that has monetary cost, cognitive switching cost, a variety of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think it's worth problematizing fully. And I think that the tension is that if you just, for any individual who is navigating a career and is trying to balance the world as it is versus the world as it should be, we also have to know the risk we're taking. So if you truly go to buck
Mhm.
the norm, know that one risk would be that the signal of your presence overwhelms the signal of your work.
Okay, got it.
And that's a personal risk that only each person can decide whether it's worth it for them or not.
Yes, yes, I love that. I appreciate and interpret your shift, your commitment shift from the way you once understood executive presence to how you understand it now as being more inclusive, right? The way you're thinking about executive presence now is a little bit more rangy, more, broad, more diverse potentially for you and for others.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying. I'm
Okay,
trying.
okay. All right, let's shift a little bit. We talked about your past. We talked about where you want to go. Where do you think you'll be 1 year from now?
I am going to answer this question very aspirationally, right? So
You do.
I'm going to futurescape. I'm going to make a reality here. So
Love it. Do it.
1 year from now will be February 2025 for our after action listeners here, right? So February 2025, I will be promoting a very successful book, and the book will be doing a few things for me. One, it will be helping me book keynotes on more influential stages than my current keynoting circuit. I'm doing well, but I also want to be in spaces where I'm able to impact larger audiences and audiences who have the chance to take what I'm talking about and actually affect a larger group of employees. So that's one thing that I would love to happen within the next year.
Yeah.
Another thing is that my coaching practice grows. I'm in the early stages of building this coaching practice, and um, a year from now, I want to both have the scope of the coaching practice be larger, but also for my confidence and my acumen as a executive
Mhm.
coach to be
Yeah.
deeper because I would have had more reps in doing this work. Um, and then the third piece is that I want in my personal life the time that I am able to be around my friends and my family to be unrushed and not stressful and to be really present to it. And for that to happen, my business has to be in a different place. Because right now, what I'm feeling is like year one startup pain, where even when I am with my kids, part of me is still at work. When I am on a date night with my wife, part of me is thinking about deal cycle, business development, top of funnel. The whole reason I'm doing this is to not be doing that. So, like a year from now, I want my mind share and my heart share when I am with my in my personal life to be fully present to that personal life. And that will take some time and it'll also take some stability and security through achievement of a sustainable
Mm,
business model.
mm. So you're reminding me of our company values. And one of our values is spirit, which means you bring your spirit to the work, whatever that is for you. And your spirit is going to look different than mine. And I want that essence of you in your work because that I think is what proliferates your influence. What does your spirit need to get there in a year?
Um, so I'll give you one thing that's exogenous, that's coming from outside of me, and then one thing that is about what I
Great,
have, right?
great,
So I'll start with me. One thing that has to happen for me is I have to shift from operating from scarcity to operating from to operating from abundance.
good. Yeah.
Um, that's really hard for me. I had many early childhood and adolescent year experiences that shifted me into a scarcity behavior pattern,
Hmm.
kind of a low level fight flight response
Yeah,
to
yeah.
a variety of things. And then, if you're familiar with the framework of toxic success, so the behaviors that actually are really problematic have actually driven my success. So scarcity got me to work frenetically. Scarcity got me to over rotate on executive presence. Scarcity got me to be constantly cooking on 3 or 4 cylinders. I was administratively leading, publishing, teaching, keynoting, built a consulting business, like did my doctorate while working full time, like all of this stuff, which is my pathway to being more successful. And so the movement to just taking a breath and being like, it's going to be okay,
Mm.
actually involves me deprogramming toxic success because the first time that I tried that meditation, what came up for me internally was, no, you're not going to be okay because, frenetic, fear-based hustling is what got you everything you have.
Reinforced. Yeah.
And like my spirit was saying to me, don't lie to yourself, bro. Like you got to
Yeah.
keep,
Yep.
grounded. And then it's like, no, like that is fear talking. And so a lot of self work. I don't sit in vipassana and meditate, but I do a form of self reflection and meditation on walks, while working out, while stuck in traffic. I have the mental discipline to tumble the big rocks of my life around in my heart and mind, in a variety of other ways. And so that's probably P1, priority one is this movement towards abundance. Um, and if I can get there, then even if I'm having a down quarter as a business person or an up quarter as a business person, it doesn't matter. That's not going to affect my piece.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
that's the ultimate end run
Yep.
on this whole hustle mentality, right? Is to have the piece be here. And the exogenous piece is I do need a sustainable business model, right? I need to be at a place where I have a sense of like what my deal architecture looks like and the fact that like I'm going to have enough top of funnel from speaking and network development and that my keynoting and coaching and workshops are getting enough traction. So I'm still so early on that although things are going really well, there's a part of me that's like, well, is it just going really well because it's year one? Which I know is like the
The
fear based,
mindset. Yeah.
the gerbil on the wheel, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that sustained success a year from now because I am a rational person and I will look at my spreadsheets and my decks and my my budget docs, and it'll help calm me down and go, look,
Yeah.
accept the data is saying you're fine.
So I just had you look ahead, and now I'm going to have you look behind. What challenges are now in your rear view mirror?
Ooh, I'll share some personal stuff here because that's what came up for me first. And you said, let's keep it real, right? So
Yeah.
um, I do not spend a ton of time and energy at this stage of my life thinking about my racial identity. And
Mm.
I did a lot when I was a teenager and in my 20s. I had a lot of angst, a lot of otherness, a lot of fear, quest for belonging, quest for acceptance. Um, that was really, really hard for me growing up. I did not grow up around very many people who looked like me or had my story. And um, so my pathway to deep self knowing and comfort with who I am was just long and fraught and winding. And I am thrilled to not be
I'm really happy for you.
building a
That
lot of
sounds.
energy on that.
Mhm.
I look back and that is that I've closed that chapter of my book, and maybe it'll reopen for other reasons. But I know
Oh,
right now that's not where I'm spending my energy. I feel very comfortable in
yeah.
who I am and how the world sees me and understands me, and even moments of frustration don't really get they don't get their hooks in me, right? So
Mhm.
that's something that I um, have let go of or don't spend time on anymore. Um, and something else that I don't spend time on anymore is around, and this is sort of like a particular thing. I used to give a lot of time away to people seeking guidance and advice, um, and sometimes get frustrated that it felt pretty like one
Oh,
way
yeah.
to be. And so I have some practices in place when people reach out to me for like, hey, I see you're doing really well with dot dot dot. Can I meet?
Yep.
Now, if you're a friend of a friend and you're like in my universe, then I'm more lax with this. But if you're truly like, I don't know, you've met them, then I actually assign a bit of homework to see if they have skin in the game. And so
Hmm.
I'll say, I've got a lot going on right now. Listen to this podcast on this exact subject. Hit me with your top 3 takeaways. And then when my travel calms down, we'll find time to meet. And Priya, unfortunately, 9
Yeah.
out of 10
I
people
know.
don't do it. They don't do it. Or I'll say, like, yes, the thing you're asking about is really well detailed in this book. Why don't you power skim it? We don't all read monographs cover to cover, but like, or Audible 1.5x, listen to it or something, and then hit me with your thoughts, and then we'll find time to meet. And it's just a little bit of a gating mechanism to say,
Yeah.
like, do you want my time, but are you willing to do any work? And if you're not, then I have to also be protective of myself because I have more
Mhm.
people who need me now than I did when I was like single or not a father, or not
Mhm.
taking care of my own parents.
Mhm. Those are good. Those are good. Thanks for sharing those. Okay, last one. I ask everybody this question. Thinking ahead, we're in mid-February. So between now and mid-March, what's a semi-big decision you have to make?
Mm. Next 30 days decision. Well, okay, I'll share this one because I think this is funny because you have been around this gauntlet. I have to figure out who I'm going to ask for testimonials for my
Oh,
book
yeah.
within the next 30 days. Um, I didn't think that this was going to come until later in the book development process, but because it takes so long to get these back and I'm on a accelerated timeline for publication, I'm going to do it earlier. And the reason that this decision feels pretty fraught for me in my own reflection, I have a list. I built a list of people, and the whole thing feels very precarious and fraught for me because the truth of it is, each person who says no or simply doesn't respond, my feelings are going to get hurt because I will tell myself something about what that means about me.
Oh, yes. I hear you. Yeah, no wonder that's what makes a small decision a big decision.
Yes, is my own layer of BS that I'm putting on it, which is right. I have no idea why they don't want to do it or why they, but again, like I'm putting my own membrane on reality, and so I know going into this that being in this liminal place in my career, building my own business, not having the status of a high profile in-house leadership role, which is part of my pathos, right? I want that status because it gives me a sense of security. I don't have that security blanket right now. So when I go out and I ask this 12 or 15 people, who have status themselves, that's why I'm asking them
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
testimonials on the book. And there's going to be a melt. I know that not
Yep.
everybody's going to say yes. And,
Interesting.
and I also know that where I am in space and time is it's going to hurt. And I'm just getting myself ready for that.
I kind of hope one of them writes back and says, "Hey, read this book and give me my takeaways." Do a little bit of homework. And I'll
Homework.
tell you this, what I learned is I've reached out to a lot of people, but I assumed they were all going to say no. And then when they started saying yes, and every single one of them said yes, I was amazed. I was like, "Yes, I got this person, this person, this person."
That's
So
amazing.
I had the other mindset. I was like, I'm going to reach out to as many people as possible
Yep.
and just see what happens. And I was delighted and surprised when people did say yes instead of
Well,
being rejected when they said no
I
or paying attention. Yeah.
I'm hoping that I can follow in your footsteps.
All right. Well, I've asked you all my questions. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, this has been a wonderful conversation. I think that as people listen to it, if you want to engage with me directly, it's super easy to find me online, and Priya will share that information out, and I look forward to getting to know new people through our conversation. Landing with others and inspiring their thinking, and having them reach out to us and wanting to keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much for all your insights, for your vulnerability, for your honesty. And I will post a link to your website, a link to connect with you on LinkedIn. And I will let you know when this goes live. Thank you so much.